You probably use a toilet every single day without thinking about it. You walk in, close the door, sit down, flush, wash your hands, and leave. It feels normal, private, clean, boring. But for most of human history, going to the toilet was not private. It was not clean. And sometimes, it was not even something you did indoors. So what did people actually do before modern toilets? The answer is much weirder than just they went in a hole. Because humans have always had the same problem. Food goes in, waste comes out, and if you live near other people, that waste becomes everyone's problem. Before cities, this was simple. If you were a small group of hunter-gatherers moving through the landscape, you didn't need plumbing. You could walk away from camp, find a private spot, and leave the waste behind. Nature handled the rest. The problem started when humans stopped moving. Once people began farming, building villages, and living in permanent settlements, waste started piling up in the same places. Suddenly, you couldn't just go over there forever, because over there was now someone's house, someone's water source, or tomorrow's food supply. This is where toilets begin. Not the shiny porcelain kind, not the flush and forget kind, but simple systems for keeping human waste away from people. In some ancient settlements, people used pits. You dug a hole, used it until it became disgusting, then covered it and moved on. It was simple, cheap, and effective enough if the population was small. But as cities grew, holes were not enough. Ancient civilizations started creating actual toilets thousands of years ago. Some homes in ancient Mesopotamia had toilet-like seats connected to drainage systems. The Minoans, Greeks, and other ancient societies also developed forms of toilets and sewers. So the idea of a toilet is not modern. What's modern is expecting every normal house to have a private, flushing toilet that instantly carries waste away. For most people in history, that would have sounded absurdly luxurious. One of the most famous ancient toilet cultures was Rome. The Romans had public latrines. These were rooms where people sat side by side on long benches with holes cut into them. Underneath, running water could carry the waste away. Imagine a public bathroom, except there are no cubicles, no privacy walls, and the person next to you might be having a casual chat. Because in Rome, going to the toilet could be, social. Public latrines were sometimes attached to bathhouses, and wastewater from the baths could help flush the waste through channels. It was clever engineering, especially compared to many other ancient cities. But it was still very far from modern hygiene. For one thing, privacy was not the priority. For another, cleanliness was not guaranteed. And then there was the famous wiping tool, a sponge on a stick. Yes, a sponge on a stick. Some sources describe Romans using a sponge-tipped stick, sometimes rinsed in water, salt water, or vinegar. There is debate over exactly how commonly it was used, and whether it was more of a wiping tool or a cleaning brush in some contexts. But either way, the mental image is horrifying enough. Roman sanitation was impressive for the ancient world, but it didn't make Rome clean by modern standards. Many homes were not connected to sewers. People still used chamber pots. Waste could still end up in streets. Disease was still everywhere. This is one of the big lessons of toilet history. Building drains is not the same as understanding germs. People knew bad smells and filth were unpleasant. They knew waste should be moved away. But they did not understand bacteria, viruses, parasites, and contaminated water the way we do now. So they often solved the visible problem while accidentally keeping the invisible one. After Rome, toilet technology did not simply move forward in a straight line. In medieval Europe, what you used depended heavily on where you lived and how rich you were. If you were wealthy and lived in a castle, you might have a garderobe. A garderobe was basically a small toilet room built into the wall of a castle. You sat over a hole and the waste dropped down. Sometimes it fell into a pit. Sometimes it fell into a moat. Sometimes it ran down the outside wall, which sounds disgusting because it was. But for the people inside the castle, it was still better than walking outside in the cold, dark, rainy night. For ordinary people, the most common toilet was usually much simpler: a privy, an outhouse, a cesspit, or a chamber pot. A privy was basically a small outside toilet over a hole or pit. A cesspit was a pit for collecting waste. A chamber pot was exactly what it sounds like, a pot you kept inside, often under the bed so you didn't have to go outside at night. And honestly, the chamber pot might be the most important toilet in history, because for centuries, millions of people used them every day. At night, you used the pot. In the morning, it had to be emptied. If you were poor, you probably emptied it yourself. If you were rich, a servant might have the miserable job of doing it for you. Where did it go? Into a cesspit, into a gutter, into a drain, onto a heap, or sometimes straight into the street. This is where you get the classic image of someone dumping a chamber pot out of a window. That did happen in some places, but it probably wasn't just a constant waterfall of sewage, like cartoons suggest. Towns often had rules about waste disposal because people knew it was a serious problem. But rules and reality are not always the same thing. If you lived in a crowded city, waste was a nightmare. A village could dig pits and spread out. A city could not. In a city, thousands of people, horses, pigs, dogs, markets, butchers, tanners, and households all produced waste. And all of it had to go somewhere. Human waste mixed with animal waste. Rain washed filth through streets. Wells could become contaminated. Rivers became dumping grounds. And the smell must have been unbelievable. But waste was not always seen as useless. Human waste was sometimes collected and used as fertilizer. This is often called night soil. In some places, people were paid to collect it, remove it from towns, and sell or use it for agriculture. Which makes sense. Waste contains nutrients. Plants grow from nutrients. So, before chemical fertilizers, human waste had value. It was disgusting, but it was also part of the economy. In other words, before toilets made waste vanish from our lives, waste was a job. Someone had to dig the pit. Someone had to empty the pot. Someone had to clean the cesspit. Someone had to haul the barrels away. Someone had to deal with the thing everyone else wanted to forget about. And those jobs were often done by the poor. This is another hidden part of toilet history. Comfort for one person often meant disgusting labor for another. Then came the slow rise of the flushing toilet. The basic idea of using water to carry waste away is ancient. But the private indoor flush toilet took a long time to become normal. In England, Sir John Harington designed an early flushing water closet in the late 1500s. But it did not immediately transform the world. It was expensive, impractical for most homes, and cities still lacked the plumbing and sewer systems needed to support it. For a flush toilet to work properly, you need more than a toilet. You need water supply, you need pipes, you need drains, you need sewers. You need somewhere for the waste to go. And ideally, you need people to understand that mixing sewage with drinking water is a terrible idea. That last part took a painfully long time. In many growing industrial cities, toilets and drains actually made some problems worse, at first. Waste could move faster, but if it moved into rivers, wells, or badly designed sewers, it would still spread disease. The toilet itself was only one piece of the puzzle. The real revolution was sanitation. Clean water coming in, dirty water going out, human waste separated from drinking water, streets drained, sewers planned, cesspits replaced, germ theory understood, public health taken seriously. That is what made the modern bathroom possible. The modern toilet was not created by one genius in one magical moment. It was the result of centuries of small improvements, failures, disgusting accidents, and public health disasters. Which brings us back to the original question. What did people do before toilets? They did not do one thing. They used holes in the ground. They used pits. They used chamber pots. They used privies. They used public latrines. They used castle garderobes. They used rivers, fields, cesspits, drains, alleys, and buckets. And if they were lucky, they lived somewhere with a system that kept waste away from their food and water. The weirdest part is that toilets changed more than just bathrooms. They changed privacy, they changed cities, they changed smells, they changed disease. They changed who had to handle waste. and they changed how much we think about our own bodies. Today, you press a button or pull a lever, and the evidence disappears. That disappearing act is one of the greatest luxuries in human history, because for thousands of years, going to the toilet was not a private little moment in a clean, tiled room. It was a smell, a chore, a public health risk, a job, a social activity, a class divide, and sometimes just a hole in the ground. So the next time you flush a toilet, remember, you are using a machine that quietly solves one of humanity's oldest and grossest problems. And the reason you don't have to think about it is because millions of people before you had no choice but to.